Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with BDEX's founder and CEO, David Finkelstein. What's new, David?
Hey, Jesse. All's good here. Hope everything's good with you. We have been working hard on our latest, I don't know what to call it, our latest release, which will be our MCP server for BDEX, which will give you access to talk to BDEX data. So it'd be kind of cool. I'm looking forward to launching it.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm excited to hear that.
Mhm.
Well, that's actually the first time even hearing about it. So I guess we need to make a launch plan there, David. So
Yeah, we've
we'll have
been working behind the scenes. So
to look at.
I just got our first demo of it this week, and it's looking pretty good. So we're getting
Oh my
excited for it.
gosh, so cool. And I'm a
Mhm.
marketer, so I try not to code, but in the world of AI, I was playing with, high level and ChatGPT, trying to make this show a little more efficient. So it's a new day. So now when people book, we're going to try to take what they book and have ChatGPT work it out so it can just create the topics and the emails
Cool.
can start sending. But
Nice.
fingers crossed, we'll see, because you got to keep the human in the loop because sometimes AI just doesn't do the trick, as we all know. But um, we'll
Yeah.
get into maybe not AI as much today because today we're talking a little bit more about creative agencies and maturity models. We're really lucky to welcome on another special guest to Deconstructing Data. Welcome to Jody Grunden. He is the partner and Virtual CFO Practice Leader at Anders CPAs and Advisors. Welcome to the show, Jody.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Thanks for having me. Thanks, David.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jody. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. We don't talk finance a lot here on the podcast, and so I'm looking forward to digging into this and learning more about what it is that you do. And so but first, let's have you kick it off. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about sort of what led you to become a partner at Anders and what you guys are doing today for your
Yeah,
customers.
yeah. First of all, I'm talking finance, so please don't fall asleep. Stay tuned in here. So basically, what I did back in 2002, I created the concept of virtual CFO service, which means working alongside business owners and really kind of helping them and guiding the ship for them to get their end goals, whether that was to sell or whether that was to build a pile of cash, whether that was just simply to be a convenience model, for the business owner. And then it wasn't until about 2011 we really started focusing on all kinds of marketing agencies, creative agencies, web design, web development, SEO, SEM, all the different marketing agencies that we felt that we could really kind of help and really work with them to really build them a better business. And that's when we created this profit-focused maturity model that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes.
Yeah, excellent. So that's a great journey, and I'm really interested in that because I have a lot of friends with agencies. I know that the agency model is sort of an interesting one. It's kind of a tough one. It's kind of like, I've seen a lot of my colleagues that I know that run different types of agencies struggle with profitability sometimes. There's a lot of nuances to it, especially when you're dealing with, trying to manage the time that your customers take of your creative team and things like that. So I'm really interested to sort of jump right into the first topic, which is the profit-focused maturity model for agencies that you guys have developed.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. So, with it, there's four pillars we'd like to talk about, and there's basically metrics that agencies really need to know and understand. And with that, we built this model around that model that you can access right on our website. I'm sure there'll be a link there provided where you can kind of guide yourself and kind of see where do you kind of stand in the maturity of your business and your finances, and with each one of these pillars that we're going to talk about. The first pillar to kind of talk about is really the cash pillar, cash management. When a client comes to us, a lot of times they'll say, hey, Jody, I've got this great opportunity, But I need to know, what do you think? Should we do it or not? Should we not do it? Maybe it's a CMO that we're going to hire. Do we have the funds to do it? And the first thing I look at is how much cash do we have? And the client that has a well-built reserve, I'm going to say absolutely great. Let's do it. Let's take that risk. Let's put some money into that individual. Or maybe they don't have a cash reserve. Maybe they're really borrowing heavily their line of credit. And I would say at that point, maybe the risk is too big. And so cash is a big part. And so then you wonder, well, how much cash should an agency or really any service-based business have? And the actual number is pretty simple. There's a formula that goes into it, but the simple way to calculate it is just simply taking 10% of your annualized revenue. Annualized revenue might mean, you're $1 million agency or $5 million agency or 10 or 100, whatever that is. You take that by 10%, and that's the amount of money that you should have in the bank and access to at a moment's notice. So $1 million agency, for simple math, should have $100,000 sitting in a liquid cash account that they can access. And that cash account, it is over and above what they would actually pay or set aside for taxes. So we recommend at that same time having another account. We call it the tax reserve account. And you should accumulate about 40% of your bottom line net income in that account, pay your monthly taxes throughout the year, and then that account should just simply be used for that. So this 10%, what I'm mentioning, that's your cash reserve, and that basically covers the cycle. So that's the number one. So what do you guys think about that first metric?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And I can tell you firsthand from working with some people in the agency business, they're not doing that.
Right.
I know, a lot of times they're pretty much, running pretty cash strapped. And so, I think first comes, in order to manage that cash model, right, you have to manage your profitability too, right?
Yeah, and that's actually the second metric, profitability. And
Okay.
so you kind of led me right into that one. So when we look at profitability, we look at a typical agency should have a bare minimum of 10% bottom line, 10% net profit, but they should be striving more towards 15 to 25%. A typical agency that we work with is about 17%, somewhere in that ballpark. So it fits right into that range. I say 10% because 10% is really what you're going to need to actually just simply go through the cash cycle, which isn't a whole lot of money. It doesn't give you a whole lot of money to grow your company. And when we and I'll give you my example with growth is that as we were growing, we doubled our size about every 3 years in growth, from when we bootstrapped our firm way back in 2002 to when we actually sold it to Anders about 4 years ago for about $10 million. So it went from $0 to $10 million within that time frame. And with that, at the very beginning, growth wasn't profitable, and that was, we were trying to figure things out. A lot of things were going right, wrong. Every time I had this great dream that, hey, next year's going to be the year, something hit me right in the face. And so, with that, we had to figure out, how can we actually grow profitable? And with that, you had to have that cash to do it. So I had to slide even more money into cash to build that cash nest egg so that we could take more risks, for growth. And, with that, once we start hitting that 15 to 25%, which a service-based business should be able to handle, that's when we actually saw profitable growth. And so we were able to grow at a really high rate, which again, 25, 35% a year at a profitable 25% bottom line. And that's really the key to growth. With that, what does that mean, staff wise? And so, because that's what's often asked, because as a service-based business, that's our main driver is people. And what I like to say is 50% of our money should be tied in our production staff, our production people, production contractors, production employees. And so if you're looking at that and you're saying your revenue is 100%, well, 50% of that should be invested into your people, and then the other 25% should go to administration, marketing, and facility costs if you still have a facility, which leaves the bottom line at that 25%. So that's kind of the breakdown that, as an agency, that you really want to look at and really want to kind of benchmark yourself against other agencies at.
That's awesome. That's great insight.
Yes. All good information.
Yeah.
Any more
What's the next pillar?
Yeah.
Yeah, the next pillar is the forecasting pillar. And with that, if you don't have a forecast, you're really doing yourself a lot of injustice, because what a forecast is, it's not a budget. It's not one of those things that you create at the beginning of the year and you set aside. You say, you know what, hey, we're going to do $1 million. We're going to have that $100,000 bottom line or $250,000 bottom line that I said we need to have. And then you compare yourself for every month, and you're like, oh, I'm so far away. I'm so far away, or I'm getting closer to what I predicted. That doesn't really help anything. What a forecast is it's when you create that initial budget with revenue drivers, and then you look at it and you compare it every single month, and it's super dynamic. And so what do I mean by dynamic? Well, it changes. You bring in your past. Hey, what did we do last month, and how does that impact going forward? How does that impact the next 11 months? That's really the key to driving it. And the way I look at that is, a forecast is very simple to like a GPS system in a car. When I used to live in Indiana, I live in Fort Indiana, and now I live in Fort Lauderdale. I really didn't need a map. I didn't need a GPS. All I needed is a vehicle, and I could find Fort Lauderdale. And the way I could find it, I know it's south. So I'll just simply drive south, and eventually I'll get to Fort Lauderdale. Well, maybe I might end up in Texas first, and then I might have to, weave around all the different states until I actually get to Fort Lauderdale, but I'll eventually get there. But what a map was, which is kind of like the budget, a map is like, okay, now we have the map. Now we have the guidelines. I take this road over here to this road, and eventually I get to Fort Lauderdale. Well, that doesn't always happen, because you've got road construction and you've got all these different things going on that make you get off the path. And so what that GPS is, or that forecast is, that's guiding you to that path. So it's telling, hey, there's a roadblock up here, road construction. You go around the road construction. It shows you exactly how to do that, and then eventually get to Fort Lauderdale in the quickest manner. And so that's why I like to look at that forecast, because when we look at a forecast, we're not only looking at the revenue side of it, but we're looking at the balance sheet side. We're looking at the assets and the debt that you might have in your company, and so, like, for instance, and then even further on, we look and break it down, and what are the drivers in that forecast that really are going to get you there. Because I can't say just create a forecast and say, hey, I need, what's your forecast? We're going to do 10% more than last year. Great. We put the numbers in. Magically, we're going to hit 10%. That never works, right? Because you don't know how to control that 10%. But if I were to tell you, hey, you're an hourly based company, so you need, how many hours your team's going to work? How many employees do you have? What's the utilization rate of your team? What are the holidays they're working? What time aren't we going to use in the calculation to determine what they can actually bill? And then create that forecast based on what the team's capacity is. And so we break it down every single month, because every month has a different amount of days that we can actually bill. November, you're not going to bill as much as you're going to bill in January, because you got holidays in November. December is the same way. And so with that, you're building that on a month by month basis, since you know exactly what each month in that forecast should yield you revenue and bottom line. And not every month's going to be created equal. Some months you're going to expect to have close to a break-even month, or maybe even a little loss month. Other months you're going to expect to have a giant month, because you've got more days in the month and more capacity to deal with that. And so as you build that forecast, then you've got to look and say, hey, do I have a sales pipeline big enough to support it over the next 3 months? We'll talk about pipeline here in a second, but with that, that's always the justifier to this forecast. And so then every month you should be looking at your numbers, not just when things are going bad or when things are going great, but you need to be looking at it on a very consistent basis every single month, bringing that forecast up, finding out, hey, what went right, what went wrong this last month, and how does that impact the future? And again, not just the revenue side. Revenue side is basically for vanity. You're looking at revenue, you're looking at your bottom line net income, and you're looking at your tax situation, but you're also flipping it over and looking what your cash situation is. And so, for instance, we might say at the beginning of the year, in November, we're gonna pick on November. We're gonna say November, you're gonna be borrowing on your line of credit. Maybe you're $100,000 into your line of credit in November, and you planned it, so it's going to happen, because that's how you built your forecast. Well, then in January, February, maybe you have some really strong months, and now you don't have to borrow on that line of credit. So you're thinking, okay, great. Now I'm building my cash reserve a little bit more, so I can get closer to that 10%. And then you hit that March number, and all of a sudden you had a really bad March, and your forecast just really drops off. And now you're at a negative line of credit. And so that's when that GPS, that's when that forecast, that's when that CFO really kind of sits on your side and says, you know what, what do we need to do in order to bring that back up? Are we okay with it? Do we want to leave it as is? Some people say, yep, let's leave it as is. I'm confident these next few months are going to be really solid and bring it back up. Other folks might say, you know what, let's make some proactive decisions right now. Let's increase price. Let's decrease price. Let's look at using contractors versus employees instead of the new hires that we had planned in April and May. Let's push things back a little bit. And we can make those proactive, decisions that's going to get us to our end goal, to where the very next month when we look at it, we say, hey, we're back to normal because we made those decisions. And that's what a forecast allows you to do. And it's amazing because we've had so many clients that'll come to us and say, you know what, we're a $3 million company and we've been a $3 million company for the last 8 years. We don't know how to get any better. We don't know how to grow anymore. I guess that's just what we are. And that's really not true. It could be because maybe you're a lifestyle business and that's all you want to do, and that's cool. And if that's how you want it, that's perfect. But for those companies that say, hey, I want to get out of this in 3 years. I want to get out of this in 10 years. I want to get this X multiple. Well, that's what that forecast is designed to do. Build it out for those 3 years or 6 years or 5 years, whatever that end goal is, and try to figure out, what do I need to do every single month now in order to get to that end goal. And it's amazing when folks do that, how quickly they can get to that goal. Maybe they might not get it in the 6 years or the 5 years they had planned, but maybe it takes them 7 or 8, or maybe they can get it to them closer. Maybe it's 2 or 3 because they've really hit some really big clients or whatever. But that forecast is really what drives, everything within the company. So you should really kind of look at those numbers, look at your average bill rate, look at your utilization rates, build that forecast based on the capacity of your team. And then the final thing is, looking at the sales pipeline, which is that fourth metric that we're going to talk about, and take a look at it and say, hey, does my contract capacity, is the amount of people I have under contract, does that equal what I've just built in my forecast? Or if it does, then great. I don't need to really do anything. If it doesn't, if it's short, then maybe we need to actually lower our expectations so that we don't overspend. Or if it's higher, then maybe we need to increase expectations. Say, hey, maybe it's time to hire that contractor maybe a little faster than we thought, or employee a little faster than we thought if it's a long-term deal. And that's where the sales capacity or sales pipeline comes into place, determining what you truly have in that pipeline to justify the forecast that we just created. Because the worst thing you can do is create a forecast, create a budget, do all your planning that you've just decided to do, and assume everything is going to happen, because that would definitely that would be the wrong decision and the not financially smart decision.
Yeah, Jody, this is a great conversation to have. It's so important. I see so many founders, so many operators that spend most of their time, if not all their time, working in their business instead of on their business, right? I'm sure you've heard that term.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I learned this, quite a while ago, the hard way, as many of us do. And it is so important to make sure you're working on your business. And I have to say, when I look at these pillars, and I'm not a creative agency, so maybe I don't fit them all perfectly, but I'm pretty good. I'm 3 out of 4 of those. I'm not going to share which one I'm missing, but I'm doing pretty good, I think, at 3 out of 4 right now. But I do spend a lot of time working on my business, and that's
David, that's a really important thing to know, because it really, our success really didn't happen until I got myself out of client work, and that's. That was a tough thing, because I really enjoyed what I'm doing. I really enjoy sitting along the business owner and really helping them out. We grew significantly more once I got out of the client service side of it and really started focusing on those numbers, focusing on the business itself, bringing an operations person in place where he could run everything, and I could just kind of sit back, guide the ship, make the decisions. And those decisions aren't the easiest decisions in the world, but make the decisions to get us going forward. Maybe get out there in the public with thought leadership and really kind of help drive revenue and drive sales. So your job as a business owner really kind of morphs over time. When you're doing everything when you first start out, like you're talking about, but you should be able to give those hats away to folks along the way. And the faster you can get rid of those hats, the better off you'll be. I haven't worked on a client probably close to 10 years. And so, with that's really allowed me to really excel the growth. I mentioned that we were at $10 million, 4 years ago when I sold. We're going to be about $17 million this year. So again, that growth, continued on even after we merged with a larger CPA firm.
Yeah, that's awesome. Excellent. So I want to jump us into the second topic, just so we keep moving along. And for me, this is kind of, this is more up my alley, because my business is a completely subscription priced business. And so talk to us a little bit about how subscription pricing changed accounting models.
Yeah, so back in 2002, when I founded the company, I wanted to change the way people thought about accounting. Period. A lot of different things. I didn't want to bill by the hour. There's a lot of things I wanted to do that accountants didn't do. Accountants wear suits and suspenders and ties. I wanted, hey, let's do something different. I wear Hawaiian shirts all the time. So even the smallest little nuance like that, it was like, hey, I want to do things differently. Accountants, worked 50 hours a week during busy season. I wanted my team to only work 40, 45 at the most, that type of thing. And so how was I going to do that? And I had to figure out a way that I could actually do that. And I thought, what if we did the work throughout the year versus at the end of the year, which was traditional for an accountant to do, tax season, because that's where a lot of folks on here probably only see their accountant once a year, and that's during tax season. And with that, it took a lot of time for that's where the time compression really hurt accountants. So it was one of those things that they're working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and it was never enough, and you're always behind and you're always trying to catch up. And I thought, I don't want to start a business like that. And so I wanted to do it a little differently. So I thought, well, how can I do that? And how can I bundle my services? And so I started taking, all these different things that, that an accountant would typically hire throughout the year, or not an accountant, but a customer would hire throughout the year, such as their, their bookkeeping and their accounting, all the different, things that would really kind of go into the day-to-day stuff. And I thought, what, if we review that and look over that on a regular basis, would people actually pay for it? Because back then we didn't know. It was one of those things that wasn't happening. Nobody did it. And I thought, well, hey, let's try it. And it was like, wow, people just loved it. They're like, wow, you would actually meet with us on a regular monthly basis? And we're like, absolutely, I would. And how am I going to charge for that now? It's like, I had no idea. And so with that, I was like, how am I going to do that? So I thought hourly would be great. And I started doing the hourly because that's what accountants always did. Everybody always billed by the hour, accountants, attorneys, you name it. And I thought, hey, that's got to be the way, I think. And, with that, what happened was that I was working with some clients that they were strapped for cash. And so we'd have our cash call meeting. We have our cash meeting, every, once a month. And I'd be ready to go. And I'd get that phone call right beforehand. It's like, sorry, I can't make the meeting. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then I'd look at the AR and it's like, well, they owe me money. And the reason why they didn't want to come to the meeting is because they owed me money. And so it was like an awkward situation here. I'm trying to help them out of a situation, and money was the problem. And so I had to figure out, well, how can I figure that out? And so I continued to bill by the hour. Then all of a sudden I had this huge AR, and I couldn't afford to be the bank anymore because I had to figure that out too. Because I didn't come from money, didn't have a lot of money to start off. I didn't have really hardly any capital at all. And I actually borrowed a lot of my credit cards back then. And with that, I would never advise anybody of that. But that's really the only way I could actually get funds to start the business, which was kind of amazing that they even let me do it back then. But, with that, I thought, hey, how can we change things about? And so I created the model. I put together I bundled the services, kind of like what a lot of folks are doing now. And then with that, how was I going to charge for it? And I thought, well, I'll charge at the end. And so I started charging at the end, and so, hey, we're going to make this a flat fee. And so I called it a flat fee service at that time, and people loved it. I was like, great, this is awesome. They knew what the number was already. It wasn't there was no hidden surprise anywhere. And what, that was great. And here's all the services we're going to include in that flat fee. And that worked really great until we had people start in the middle of the month, at the end of the month, maybe they'd quit during the month. And then it was like, well, how do I calculate that? Do I owe money to that? It was like, it just became one of those things that I want that customer experience to be, number one. And so I thought, how can I even do it better? So I thought, what if I build them weekly? And instead of monthly at the end of the month, why don't I just build them weekly like an employee would get paid weekly? And then my business partner was like, nobody will ever do that. And I'm like, well, let's try it. And with that, what happened was every new client we picked up, I said, here's your weekly fee. We zap your account every Monday. And I got zero pushback. And it was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And now we're billing $1,500 a week for services. And no one's even batting an eye. And the cool part about it was everybody's showing up at the meetings because it automatically comes out of the account. They don't have to worry about, getting behind on payments and all that kind of stuff. me, I didn't have to feel guilty about them, asking for a payment when I saw that they're in a huge cash crunch. So it made that conflict, that internal conflict, it went away, and it made it super easy for us. And so with that weekly bill was hitting every single Monday. And so Monday, of course, is my favorite day of the week, because and it got more favorite when I got to that $10 million mark, because you can kind of imagine that one. It was really nice. And, with that, it made it super nice for us, but it was really nice for the client. They loved it too. And with the subscription base, because we called it subscription base, we started that really in 2007-ish. We called it subscription base, and we said, here's what's included in it. We're going to a la carte the specific things that you want on the accounting thing. And you can kind of imagine this, think about this with your own agency. What can you do? And we took some a la carte things that we thought, here's people, some people want it, some people don't want it. And, for ours, maybe they had a bookkeeper on staff or an accountant on staff, and they didn't need that person, but they needed the high level. That's great. We took that out of it, and we said, okay, here's your fee based on that. And so our CFO level, it was all encompassing. So anything outside of the accounting, we were going to help with. So if you had a profit sharing plan you want us to help with, if you had us to help you with your pricing, if you wanted to help us with whatever that was, it was included in that fee. And so we made it super concierge with the client. And then the client's like, well, hey, can you do your taxes for us? I'm like, of course, we're an accounting firm. We can definitely do your taxes. And we thought, hey, let's only do taxes for those that are in our concierge program, our CFO program. And it worked out really well. They loved it. You're like, wow, this is great. If we can bundle all of that, I can pay on a weekly basis. I can quit anytime I wanted. There was no yearly contract or no 2-year contract. It was strictly on a weekly basis. And they're like, wow, what's the catch? And it's like, no catch, just let me know. And they're like, what if we, leave in 8 weeks? Do I owe you anything? You're like, nope. If you leave in 8 weeks, that's on me, because we didn't do a good enough job to keep you here. And it was like, wow, that's interesting. And so it created that entrance, the barrier of entrance, because instead of saying, hey, Dave, it's going to be an $80,000 deal. We're going to expect you to have a 2-year contract. So that's $160,000 with this clause. If you leave, you're going to owe me half the money. All that kind of stuff went out the door. And the client's like, wow. So the barrier of entry made it super easy. So my closing ratio on my clients went up, which was really cool. So instead of, closing, 20, 15, 10%, whatever it was way back then, I'm closing 30, 40, 50%, because that barrier of entry was super easy for the client. Then the client experience was great. Then you're probably thinking, well, my business partner, he's a super skeptical one. He's the one that's going to challenge me on every single concept. He's like, but how long will they be there? Will they just be there for a year? Will they be there for 6 months, whatever? And it's like, well, that's up to us. So we have to create a solid service level that we're meeting with them on such a consistent basis, whether it's on a weekly basis, whether it's every other week, whether it's, 2 or 3 times a month, whatever that was, very consistent basis, that they're not going to want to leave us. And, with that, our average client stays with us for a little over 5 years. And so it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. They stay with us for 5 years. And with that, they get a really great service. And then it's like, well, why do they leave in 5 years? Well, they leave because they hit their goal. They sold their company, they merged with another company, they handed it down to their kids, or they just simply decide, it's time to hire somebody internally. We're big enough that we really need somebody that can be there on a regular daily basis, that type of thing. And it was like, great. And so, with that, we just kept really kind of working the model until we could actually deliver it even better. So the idea there was, well, how do we figure out client satisfaction, customer satisfaction? Because that's one of our biggest metrics. So we'd send surveys out, we'd make calls to our clients, we'd pop in and, hey, how are things going? And as we could see client satisfaction remaining super high, our client churn was super low. It was about, I think we had a retention rate of about 94%, 92 to 94% on a regular basis. And again, that rest of our folks that were, occasionally we'd make a mistake and they would leave, but for the most part, they're hitting their goal there. And it just made it really nice. And so it changed all of our metrics. So instead of the hourly bill metric that we'd have, now we're picking up how many clients we need to pick up, what's the average size of the client, what's the cadence that we're going to pick them up in, and with that, it made it so easy because it just built onto each other. And it really became like a snowball effect with the subscription-based billing model. And really, there's no way that I could have done it any other way. Hourly work just wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have made a difference. But subscription-based really helped out. And it was one of the other things that was kind of cool about subscription-based that with our team is that, there's this law called Parkinson's law. And so what that means is that people will work to the environment they're in. So if I have one job, I'm working 40 hours a week, I will bust my butt and I'll work 40 hours a week, and I will feel like I've got a lot done. And then when you work in a business like ours, now they've got 2 clients. They don't work 80 hours a week. They still work 40. They figure it out. They figure out all the different things. They figure out how to delegate. They figure what's important. They figure out how to really manage the processes. And then, then it's like, you know what? I tell you, David, as a CFO, I'm going to require you to work 18 clients. And you're like, what? 18 clients? How is that even possible? I'm busting my butt working 40 hours a week on 2 or 4 clients. And that's when we actually opened up everything to show everybody. We opened up our model and showed everybody, here's what everybody's book is, here's what everybody's working, and here's how much they make because of that. And it's like, all of a sudden, it's like, wow. Now everything kind of opened up. And so it cleared. Even our number 1 CFO right now almost quit on us about 6 months in because exactly that. There's there's no way you can expect me to work 3 times as much as I'm doing. When we opened our books, it was like, all of a sudden it was like, wow, you are working that. And so they actually squeezed in. Our CFO, that same CFO works about 18 clients, manages about I'd say $1.7 million in business. And with that, works no more than 40 hours a week and loves what they're doing because they figured out how to delegate. They figured out how to work with a team. They figured out how not to hoard things because that's typically what an accountant does. They hoard everything. They think you can do it faster and better than everybody else. You probably know people like that. And, with that, they were allowed to really kind of figure out how to manage a book and how to be an entrepreneur within inside of a business. And that was the cool thing about the subscription-based model. It allowed us to create a bunch of mini entrepreneurs, and which is really difficult to even have in a business. Entrepreneurs that really wanted to stay. So we had to figure out how to incentivize them and making sure that they stayed and making sure that they were getting, incentivized for every single dollar that they had. And so we created what we call a incentive program on that, where they actually get a monthly incentive based on the size of the book of business they have. And so they can manage it up and down based on that. So it was kind of cool. The subscription base kind of built into something else, which is that the incentive plan that we had, and really it made everybody sticky, from the clients all the way to our team members.
Yeah, Jody, that's really interesting. And I know that a lot of agencies have been, getting creative and turning to a subscription model exactly for those reasons. I've seen it with some of our clients. I've seen it with some colleagues of mine. But I do want to jump into the next topic also, because I think it applies to exactly to what you're talking about as well, how creative agencies can scale profitability. And I think that, the subscription model certainly plays into that.
I think the subscription model is really the key to that. And the reason why I say that is because it does snowball effect. When you think about it, when you have, every single year that we create our forecast, because we do exactly what we tell everybody to do. So we'll create our forecast, and we always have that base amount. So under subscription, we've got this monthly or weekly nut of X amount of dollars. And so that's our base amount. So what's our retention rate going to be, and what is our, our win rate going to be? And so what's our win rate? How many clients we're going to win? How many clients we're going to lose? We build out that forecast there. And then looking at it, it's easy to scale. And so the biggest thing is when we lose a big client, it's not the end of the world, because we've got it, we're building into that forecast. It's one of many clients, because what the subscription-based model does, it breaks out your big clients. If you're doing it right, it'll break out your big clients and make them a small percentage of your overall revenue, to where, like for instance, we don't have any clients over 2% of our entire revenue, and so if that client leaves, then we just lose the next weekly amounts. We don't lose $100,000, the next day type of thing. It's spread over that next, what we consider that next week. And so on a psychological event, it makes it a lot easier to manage it and going through it. But what also subscription-based does, allows you to actually be able to figure out your team's capacity in a much easier way. Because you should be able to know, if I pick up X amount of clients, I'm going to need X amount of people to service that. And I know exactly then when I need to hire those people. And so it takes the emotion out of hiring, because a lot of times we hire because we think, oh, our team's busy, I got to hire. And it's like, well, do we even have any basis for that? Well, what you do is when you build your models, you create that basis. You create the data that's going to support hiring that next person, and knowing exactly what person to hire. We've got it marked in within our company, we know exactly when we're going to hire the next CFO. We know exactly when we need to start interviewing for that CFO, and we know exactly when we need to hire the support team below that CFO. And it's not all the same day. It's spread out based on, we know it's going to take us 3 months to find a CFO. It's going to take us 1 month to find an accountant, whatever that is. And we know exactly how to hire. And hiring is really the key to profitability. If you can hire at the right time as sales are coming in, that's when you're going to be profitable. It's a lot easier said than done, of course. But, with a subscription-based billing model, it makes it much, much easier than it does with the regular hourly bill model with the big projects. I had many clients, back when right at COVID there, where they had clients stalled on signing contracts, and it happened. It's even happening now where they're stalling, and then they'll sign quickly and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's like, well, how long do I keep my team? I got my team built up here. How long do I keep it? And what happens is they spread it out too long. Their cash reserve goes to nothing. Now they've got to really build it back up. And once they won that project, they're just building back up what they lost. So they didn't gain anything outside of just simply moving money and keeping their team. Whereas when you have subscription based, when you can build that in there, again, easier for entry for clients. You're getting clients easier. The clients will stay longer. And then the fact that you can predict a lot better the profitability. And when they're all going in that same direction, it just makes it so much easier to scale and to scale profitably.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've seen that too in my own business. The subscription model has made our business much more predictable. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Such a great topic. I know that a lot of the marketing agencies listening could take a lot away from that, but I want to make sure we get to tech stack. We are on our 196th episode, so we've done this 196 times. So we're curious, what are your favorite tools in your tech stack that empower you and your team, Jody?
I would say a tool outside of the tools that it would be really difficult for an agency to use would be reach reporting. And I say reach reporting, and what it is, it's a very dynamic tool that anybody can buy. Anybody can kind of plug and play. If you've got QuickBooks, or if you've got really anything else that has the ability to hook up to the to reach, you can pull your data in pretty quickly, get some really cool dynamic reports, and then you can get some financial statements, all the stuff that you would get with an accounting program. But the cool part about it is it has a really cool forecasting side to it, and so you can actually build your forecast just like I talked about right within inside that reach model, and it's very easy to do. If you are good at Excel, reach is not a problem, and you can actually work it out and really do some really cool stuff with it and build it right into your forecasting model. And so it kind of takes the place a lot of times with the built-in models that like a QuickBooks would have, or a Xero, or really any other accounting platform you might be using, and it puts into it one that you can actually use and break things down in the non-financial indicators that we talked about. Super nice little graphs that really have meaning to them, or to the financial ones that a little more advanced that you would know. Like you can build graphs out. It's going to say, hey, when am I going to get that 10% reserve? I'm at 1%. It shows based on where I'm going to hit it. I'm going to hit it in October, and you can kind of see that visually, which makes it a lot easier than for a lot of people. I'm a visual person, so it makes it a lot easier for me to have that goal and to really look to strive for it. So it kind of breaks it out in a really nice way. So reach reporting would be probably the number one tool that I would recommend all agencies out there to use if you want a tool that's going to help you in the financial side.
Very
Awesome.
cool.
That's great. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that before, so I will definitely check that out as well.
Yeah, definitely. So this has been a really great conversation. I know I definitely have taken a lot away from it, Jody. But in closing, would you like to let listeners know how they could reach you after the show?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, if you don't want to reach out and you want to kind of find out a little bit more about what I do or what we've done, just Google us. We got a lot on YouTube. There's a ton of stuff out there. Just Google my name, Jody Grunden. You'll see tons of stuff out there, and it'll talk about everything that I talked about. Kind of get even more in depth about the different metrics we talked about. Or if you don't want to do that, you want to reach out directly, feel free. Just reach out with my email. It's jgrunden, Grunden at anderscpa.com. Either way is fine. I'd be happy to, and I'd be happy to hop on a quick 1 hour appointment with anybody and help them with any questions they might have.
Awesome, Jody. Yeah, this has been a great conversation, and you definitely filled our minds with some great information as well. So thank you so much. I'm sure our viewers and listeners got a wealth of information from you today. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Yeah, seriously, this is such a valuable conversation, and we always love having leaders like you on Deconstructing Data. But I will go ahead and close us out with a video. Until next week, everyone. Bye-bye. So audience members, we want to invite you to get powered by BDEX. Build authentic connections with your audience and drive unprecedented engagement. So just imagine harnessing the power of AI to craft your audiences that truly resonate with your brand, ensuring that your marketing is hitting the mark every time. We want to bring you closer to those marketing goals, and we're eager to guide you. So just visit bdex.com. You can click on the Talk to an Expert button and get powered by BDEX. Deconstructing Data is the show that makes data make sense. Every Thursday, David Finkelstein and myself, Jessie Lezak, sit down with industry experts to unpack how data really drives marketing. We do this in plain language anyone can understand. If you want real insights, real conversations, and zero jargon, tune into Deconstructing Data live on LinkedIn every Thursday at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Yo, yo, yo.